Italy. It's possible.
People often ask me who benefits the most out of projects. Is it the community that you go and work with, or is it the people who go and work on the project? And it's an interesting question. I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that.
I think it is an interesting question, but I think both perspectives are really congruent. Yeah, I can't imagine successful projects in which the population, perhaps in an Indian rural environment, really, or in Cambodia, as you told me, if a project is not really profitable and useful for the population, it can't be useful for the people who are working and who are going so far away to participate in the project. So I think it's an interdependence of both aspects. Yeah, because the first persons who really would get aware that it would not be a successful project because the population really does not take a profit out of it, they will get aware as the first, and they will say, that's not a good thing, I will never go again. But I think perhaps it would be interesting to evaluate. I'm sure that many of the young people went to 2 or 3 projects because they were convinced that they did a useful work, not only for themselves, because they made this experience being in another country, traveling, having adventure, but really have done useful work for people.
Round Square is a student-centered organization, and it provides wonderful opportunities for young men and women. Can you recall how you might remember how it impacted on the lives of young men and women in your experience in your past?
Yeah, when perhaps I start with experiences of my own children, of our own children. I think it was useful for all 3 of them. They went on exchange, and the boy went to a project. And one of our daughters really, she got, as we say, the most international Plessing member of the Plessing family, and the chance to meet you here in Hennersburg only could occur because she now is living here in your country and not in Berlin in Germany, because she is doing development work like we do in the project of Round Square here for the GIS, which is a sort of organization of the German Ministry of International Cooperation. And so she decided to make project work sort of professional life task. Yeah? And that enabled her to go out, and it enabled us to follow them to South Africa once a year to see them. But I know that a lot of young people, they really took advantage not only of the experience being on exchange or participating on conferences or participating in projects, but they built up a sort of network which is really international, made of international communication. And I'm sure that whatever they do as a business, that they drew a lot of profit for their professional life after school.
Thank you for that. You mentioned the first conference you went to in the Athenian School in California, San Francisco. Were there any others that are memorable, that were very special to you? Any other international conferences that were special?
Sure. I remember especially the foremost conference in Australia. Yeah, for me it was absolute one of the high points. It was 1995 when we met in Southport School. And because schools there are very different to European schools, perhaps they are very conservative British schools still working, and I'm always really astonished to go to schools which are not similar to our schools. So we learned a lot about how you can do schools in other continents. The main experience was, as I told you already, was hosting a conference in my own school. And then it was a special adventure to go to Gordonson in 1985, just when I became a headmaster. I went to Gordonson because this was really the cradle of Round Square, with the Round Square building, and it was a sort of pilgrimage to a holy place. Yeah. And years later, it was in '84, I think, I came back to Gordonson, and Michael Maver, who was in charge in those times, he asked me to give an address to the school in the school assembly in St. Christopher about Kurt Hahn and about Round Square. And for me it was rather exciting because I prepared that speech in English the whole night before, and I was totally exhausted after having given the speech in St. Christopher's. So I think that was sort of personal Round Square conference I had to manage. I think, to be honest, every conference, even my last in Cape Town, was a big adventure for me. Yeah. It's always interesting meeting people, but it's always an adventure. And I think even when you are 70 or more years old, it's good for you to leave your path and be still prepared to adventure in this. And I think to be together with people from all over the world, that's really an adventure.
I'm going to digress for a moment because you mentioned Kurt Hahn.
Yeah.
And I think it would be important for us to bring up the topic of Kurt Hahn. And have you special memories of him? Can you recall times when you met him and what he was like?
Yeah, after the war, he came back from Gordonson because he spent his retirement years in near Salem, in the former Salem branch school, and he lived there. And he, from time to time, he invited young staff members of Salem School to hear about their impressions about the school. And that was one purpose of these invitations. The other purpose was that he wanted to influence educators that they follow the right pursuits. And so when we met him, Christian and me, we were invited for tea at Hermannsburg. That was the name of the school. And he was concentrated as I've never seen a man. We spent 2 or 3 hours and he had only one main subject. And he told us that every student all over the world has to learn this mouth-to-mouth breathing method of revitalization after getting drowned, because he was suffering that every year in Germany, but all over the world, so many people are killed by drowning. Is it right to say?
That's right.
Drowning. Yeah. So he was convinced that there was only this method, and because he always has a mission, and he was a missionary of his ideas, he then talked to us, and I told you, if we would be prepared, he would like to put us on the table and practice it to show how important it could be and how helpful. But it was, for me, it was was really a great experience to meet this old man who was a moral authority to us, because we lived in his school, one of his schools, and we were lucky to have him back to Germany after his immigration to Scotland.